Hello. Welcome to another UTS Startups Confessions. Can I get a little round of applause, please? Thank you very much. It's more of a golf clap. We do have caddy snacks in the window. Highly recommended for anyone that's enthusiastic about golf or health. But give us a real clap. Come on. Okay. Beautiful. That was not a golf clap. Thank you very much. Okay, so the why should you care about today's video is going to start here. So we're going to flip up the order a little bit because this is something very special and I want people to understand really clearly what we're talking about. So, change in organizations kind of sucks. Okay, so departments change, ways of doing things change, pandemic changes some things, blah, blah, blah. And how large organizations handle change is critical to their success in how that change works out and what they end up doing. And you have an incredible example of turning research in change into a new way of doing it that then has an effect on potentially millions of people. So talk me through, let's take it down to the base level though, for the 1,000 people watching this. Talk me through how change should be handled, please, Lydia.
Firstly, thank you for having me today, Murray. So traditionally, how change has been handled for the last few decades is through a very linear and stepped approach. So step 1, do this, step 2, step 3, and so on. Now, this was fantastic in the 1950s when these models were first introduced, and they were actually revolutionary at the time. Sometimes people even love the simplicity. Everyone loves a good stepped model, right? 1 through to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just to tick things off. However, what we found more recently and what the research has indicated as well as experience is that change is actually not simple, right? It's very complex. And to make that complexity even more, we have people who are very complex, right? And we see a lot of change resistance, and that's because there are people involved in change. So what we need to do is, and what we've realized is that we need to move away from simplistic models and linear models and have something that is a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more kind of agile and human-focused so that it can deal with the complexity and the chaos of change.
Okay. This is why I don't do change management, because you've lost me already. But for the people at home, let's say I walk into my kitchen, I don't like how a certain kind of cupboard is set up, so I just have a habit of changing things around and then upsetting people. Okay. How should I manage that kind of change at a really local level at home?
Yeah, love that analogy. And obviously, Murray, you've been reading the book already, which is great. So I do use that type of analogy in the book. And that is essentially, when you go in and you want to transform or change a cupboard at home, what do you do? What's the first thing that you do? You look at it, sometimes we look at it and it's like, oh, too much to change right now, and just close it and push everything in, trying to keep it in and then pretend it doesn't exist or walk past it really quick. But eventually we have to kind of face it, right? So you open it up and the first thing that we need to do is take everything out, right? So you take everything out of the cupboard. What we're essentially doing is unleashing the chaos, right? And that's really important during change, whether it's at a local level, even at a family level versus global organizational level. You need to face the chaos and unleash it. Once you unleash it, so you take all of the things out of your messy cupboard at home and you put it on a table. Now you're facing the chaos, right? A lot of organizations, unfortunately, what they do is at that point, they go through what is called a motivation dip, or implementation dip. And that's when they feel really disheartened by the amount of chaos that they're facing. And so they sometimes just take everything back and shove it in that cupboard as it was before, and sometimes even worse. But what happens here is that they lose a lot of the trust from the people. Okay? So what we need to do is unleash the chaos and then navigate the chaos. Right? So you go through and you see what is it that needs to be gotten rid of, what's expired, what's broken, what sort of old legacies and mindsets, what are some of the outdated, potentially, resources, and then what is it that I need? What do I need to equip that cupboard with? What are some of the new resources, knowledge, skill sets that we need to implement and adopt? And then we look at it, and then we also need to take into consideration who else is in the house with us, who's going to be using that cupboard. And that, unfortunately, is something that organizations kind of neglect or forget. They think that if just 1 or 2 people make the whole change, then it'll be great. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We need to make sure that whoever is involved or impacted by that change is part of that co-design process. So going back to our cupboard, we bring our family in and see what makes sense to them. So for example, I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old now. And I would say, when I'm designing a cupboard or transforming a cupboard, I would get their input. So can they reach the lollies? Okay, well, I need to put that higher. Right? And if I want to empower them to, for example, make their own breakfast before school, I need to make sure that the breakfast stuff is reachable for them. So I get that user co-design, but also the user testing all throughout. And this is how we empower our people that are impacted and involved to be part of that change journey. And we test and iterate and evaluate whether what's working and what's not. So this is the framework that I propose. It's called the 6E Change Facilitation Framework. So by doing that, we make sure that everyone's involved in that journey and they're engaged. So that's another E, engaged throughout that change journey. And it's dynamic. And then at the end, you get the cupboard and everyone's been part of it. So then everyone is able to take ownership and accountability to keep it that way. Right? All the while evaluating what needs to be iterated and changed so that we can make sure it's constantly evolving. So we don't stay stagnant in an organization, but continue to evolve and adapt to keep up with the rapidly changing world around us.
Okay, I want to live in your house with your wonderfully organized cupboards in consultation with everyone else. But that's a lovely way of describing it, and I think you're very good at describing things in those kind of ways that are accessible for people. I'm going to then link this into how this is now a scaling kind of technology-based solution as well. But I'll go back first. Who were you before the Change Hub?
Oh, wow, okay. So if we go really, really far back, I started out as a pharmacist a very long time ago. And then my husband and I moved to the UK where I couldn't practice pharmacy anymore. And so I started exploring and experimenting with other areas, and that's when I got into change and absolutely loved it. And then when we came back to Australia, I kind of took a different path completely and started in change. And then I was offered to do my PhD in implementing change in healthcare. And from that, then I developed the Change Hub and evolved to what it is today. But essentially from pharmacist through to change facilitator, through to my PhD, and now founder of the Change Hub.
Okay, bring me back to PhD, because everyone knows people that have done PhDs and they end up with a thesis and that goes in a drawer, and they spend their life talking about this wonderful thesis. Sorry, maybe some people, I know not everyone, but what was your experience of that, and why did you take that further?
So when I finished my pharmacy degree, I never thought I would step into a university ever again. And so when I was offered to do my PhD, it was an industry PhD. So what really attracted me to this was it was practical. So I was going out and working and then bringing that experience and the findings from the implementation study that we were doing into the research. And I did enjoy it. It was very opposite to my natural traits. Usually I'm a very big picture person, but it really forced me to be very detailed, very critical. And I'm very grateful for that, because these are skills that I've realized are really crucial to have. But like you said, Murray, I knew that nobody would ever pick up my thesis to just read unless they want a really good bedtime story. But I thought, you know what, how will people, I want to get this out there. this framework, this approach, especially because a lot of my supervisors and the panel that I was presenting my research to said that this framework that I've developed by the end of the PhD was really great in being applied to different industries. So I wanted people to be able to know this, realize that it's evidence-based, and that's where I turned it into this book, which is much more palatable and readable and relatable than a thesis. And also intertwining in the book a lot of that personal, familial aspect of change, making sure, that we can apply it in every aspect of our lives, this framework, whether it's with my three-year-old at the time who I wanted to change his eating habits, all the way through to global organizations who I've helped with their transformations.
Okay, I want to hear more about that. So talk me through the moment in time when you went from I'm doing a PhD to I'm doing something with that PhD.
Really a critical tipping point for me. So I was doing my PhD, and at UTS they were offering commercialization workshops for higher education students. And so I thought, you know what, that sounds like a really interesting workshop. I've always been slightly entrepreneurial minded, but I didn't really know how I could take that to the next level with my research and with what I was doing. So I went to this workshop, and they got us to do a pitch, really got me thinking outside the box. And just as I happened to be doing that pitch, in walks Murray.
Sorry.
Yes, that's right. So again, it was this really crazy idea at the time, because in my research we were using machine learning to predict the most effective change facilitation strategies to overcome certain change barriers. And so I was pitching this framework and this platform at the time that would do that for you. And nothing had come to fruition just yet. It was just a really seedling of an idea. And as I was pitching this, Murray walks in, and after my pitch, he corners me and he said, "Would you like to pitch that to the director of Optus, who is coming in 20 minutes?" Now, at that point, it was literally just a pitch that was there and ideated all the way through just in that last 2 hours. So, but being who I am, I said yes.
It was a good pitch.
It was a good pitch, but I had my little doubts, and so I kind of reverted back to what I could actually offer Optus at the time, which was consulting. Right? I didn't want to put my idea out there just yet because it was still just a really tiny idea. But when I was speaking with John, who was the director, and he said, "Well, how would you make this consulting? How does it go beyond Lydia? How would you make it scalable?" And that's when I really started thinking about a platform for change. And that's how the startup has evolved. And that's from that week I signed up to UTS Startups and started working on my idea of a change platform.
Beautiful. Okay. So firstly, thank you for doing that. He was incredibly impressed, as he should be. PhD into then more formalized content around that, and then into a platform that can allow lots of people to adopt this methodology for themselves. How does that look for people that might be using it?
So at the moment we have a global organization that's using it at the moment, and
can you say who? It's Confessions.
It is Confessions, yes. So I've been very fortunate that Nestlé's come on board and is using the platform globally, so across 50 different countries, and it's been fantastic. I mean, I did let them know it's still beta, but they've been fantastic in giving a lot of feedback on it, as well as just using it. Now, that started out end of last year, and I also help them, so coach them through how to use it, but also how to navigate change in their respective markets. And it's been a really great learning journey, and now it's given me the confidence to be able to put out the platform on a for my wider network, as well as just put it out there. But it's essentially, it houses, it's really your toolkit to navigate the chaos of change. So here in the book, you'll get the framework and understanding of that framework and how to apply that framework, but then you get the hands-on equipping you with the tools and templates and resources and knowledge that you need to be able to navigate change, which is all housed on that platform.
Okay, beautiful. So I don't just get limited to what's in a book. I then have tools so that we can have facilitators, but we can also do things ourselves, and we can deploy it across 50 countries if we want to, like that.
Exactly right.
Okay, that's incredible. So looking back, if you could go back to 2019 and tell yourself something, what would it be?
Just go out there and give it a go. I mean, I did face a lot of rejection at the start, countless. It was sometimes, it was really disheartening, but just keep going. If you believe in your product, if it's backed up, whether it's evidence or application, just go out there and talk to people about it, network, get great partnerships as well, improve your profile, and just make sure that when people think of a particular topic that you're trying to address, they think of you straight away. I think it's sometimes you do get like that little bit of the imposter syndrome a little bit, but I think if your product should speak for itself and your profile should speak for itself, and you should always constantly be building that. And just go out there and pitch, even if it's to the director of Optus. Just do it. What's the worst that they can say is no, and you're exactly where you were, so it doesn't really matter. At least you've had a go and had some experience with it, and just keep trying.
Okay, I love that, because I think people forget why they're pitching sometimes, and they do pitch training and they come up with different versions of things for different audiences, but at the end of the day, you're telling people what you're doing in a convincing way so that they can get on board or be a customer or do something else. And it sounds like you're doing that very well across a lot of people. And at the other side of this is, I think people look at consulting and then wonder what part does that play in scalable startups. And I've got a confession for you that looking at all the B2B startups that I've seen over the years, the most common pathway is they start out consulting, or they start out in a large company with good domain expertise, and then they leave that company because they can't stand the company anymore, or industry or whatever else, and then they consult back to that company and to the next one, the next one, the next one, and they can then afford to build out something that replaces themselves. It happens every day, and to have it with a research background as well, I think is especially strong. I would love it if more people that put so much effort into their research on top of an incredible professional background were doing this and taking it out to the real world, because otherwise it just sits in a drawer. And this is already across 50 countries and will be across every other country and every other company, I've got no doubt. It's hard to think of a book that's more impressive than this as well. I don't normally give book recommendations, but this is exceptional. Where do people go to find their copy?
So they can go on our website, thechangehub.com.au, and they just go into Change Book, and then they can just order it online, and they'll get it in a couple of days. So.
Okay, that URL again was?
thechangehub.com.au.
Okay. Gee, it'd be nice if this was out for the pandemic.
It would have, it would have been. Then it wouldn't be so many examples in there of how we navigated the pandemic. So there you go.
I guess change is not going to stop anytime soon.
No, that's right.
No,
There'll be other things in there, definitely, yes.
Okay. I'll wrap up in a second, but first I'll say every Friday at 3:30 at UTS Startups at Central, we run these confessions. We have the best pizza I've ever had at these events. Do we have the best pizza of any? Yes. I'm getting nods in the audience. It is the best pizza you'll ever taste. Free drinks as well, open to the public for people that care about startups and just want to network and get involved. Thanks to Amazon Web Services for providing that sponsorship, and thanks to everyone here for making these events so lovely as well. It's a great group of people. And thanks most of all to Lydia. Join me in thanking Lydia for her time today. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you for having me.